Hello, everybody at home. Today we're going to talk about one of the most exciting books written on Narnia.
And we don't like Anthony.
Oh, there we go. You heard that. I didn't say that. Anyway, that was the peanut gallery, right? And there's a book called Planet Narnia by Michael Ward, and he showed how the 7 Chronicles of Narnia are linked to the 7 medieval planets. But if we're going to understand that, we're going to spend a little part of class mapping out the medieval cosmological universe. And when we get there, I think you'll find that it's worthwhile because it's pretty neat. So I think I can see it. Now, in the pre-Copernican universe, or when I say universe, we're thinking Milky Way from our point of view, right? What's at the center? It's the Earth. Good. Instead of the sun being at the center, the Earth is at the center, right? But remember the very first lecture, I told you that even though the medievals thought the Earth was at the center, and you would too if you didn't have a telescope, they were just being scientific and made the most sense. I did tell you that although they thought it was at the center of the Earth, they did know that the Earth was round. You remember that? They knew it was round. So at the center of their universe was a round Earth. And I mean, just to be fair, I mean, do you ever just stop and think that you're on an Earth that's moving like super fast? I still find that hard to believe. And remember, our Earth is double moving, right? Because it's not only moving like this, what else is it doing? Spinning on its axis, right? I mean, it's unbelievable that we don't feel that and all that sort of stuff. And by the way, when you get to the end of this book, it's really kind of cool. And we'll discover that Narnia is actually a flat world. And all the waters run off. And at the end of the book, Caspian finds out that the Pevensey kids are from a round. You're from a round world, and you didn't tell me. We have fairy tales here where people go to. And then he says, do the people on the bottom actually walk upside down? And I think it's Edmund who says, well, there's nothing particularly exciting about a round world when you're on it. Well, that's the whole point of these books and the artwork of Amanda Gandy is to show us magic again, right? To re-enchant the world. We kind of forget what a crazy thing it is that we're living on a circle that's moving. How fast is that? I don't remember. You would know this useless information.
Miles an hour?
Yeah, I mean, we're moving pretty fast. And we're spinning fairly fast, too. And it's just amazing, right? So, again, they knew the Earth was at the center, and they thought that the Earth did not move. Right? It was stationary at the center. Now, part of the reason they believed that was not so much from the Bible, because the Bible doesn't really say that. It was more from Aristotle. And Aristotle believed that the Earth had to be at the center, because that's how okay.
The Earth moves 1,000 miles an hour.
It is that fast, 1,000 miles an hour. Like I said, I find that hard to believe. I still think that those people, down in Australia are walking upside down. Of course, they probably think we're walking upside down. I know, whatever. But by the way, that's a really instructive thing to look at maps from other parts of the world, right? Because in our traditional map, you've got the United States right at the center, right? And I'll never forget when I was in grad school, visiting one of my colleagues in grad school, and she was from Japan, and she had a map of the world, and Japan was at the center. And I'm like, it just completely throws your mind off. Have you seen one where Iran's at the center? Or no? No. They don't do that, okay. But I can see the Japanese doing that, though, right at the center.
I do remember the maps that used to have the United States larger than it physically.
That's right. You're right. It was expanded like that, and the proper map has Africa huge, right? And also I think I did see one map sometime from somebody in Africa that the map sort of looked upside down from our point of view. It's like you put yourself at the center, and that's just. Like I said, it just completely blows your mind of looking at the world in a different way. So we're going to learn the medieval cosmological model. So at the center is the Earth, and then there are 7 planets that are circling our Earth. I won't do all of them, but there are 7 planets circling the Earth in perfect concentric circles, like a bullseye. Now today, we believe that the orbits are actually what? They're not perfectly circular. What they are? Another word? I was close. Did you say it? The word is elliptical. That's what you're saying.
Oh, that was crazy word.
And that really puzzled a lot of people. It puzzled Galileo, and it puzzled Copernicus had to explain things.
He keeps looking at me.
Robbie, stop.
Wait, is it Clinton or Robbie? Who's doing it? It's Clinton?
Clinton.
It's always Clinton.
Yeah,
Do I need to text and say, leave your husband to take care of it? Amanda needs you. So we text Paul.
Get Paula up here.
Yes.
Oh, you guys are funny, man. We're going to get you next semester, I hope. I'm going to be able to teach without you guys. Okay, it's going to be good fun. It's going to be Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be good stuff.
That's so good.
We'll make her a hobbit. Would you like to be a hobbit? We'll make a nice hobbit.
She's got hairy feet.
Oh, man! Marcy will be an elf. You make a good elf. And you can be a hobbit. And he can be a troll. Anyway,
The Troll King.
the troll king. I'm a troll. Anyway, so... but that actually, was it Tycho Brahe? Somebody that finally figured out the ellipses, because they couldn't figure out how things work because they thought it was concentric because they saw the circle as perfect. And often it was an emblem of God in the Middle Ages, right? The circle is perfect. Well, we need Anthony here to talk about his sacred geometry, right? Mm-hmm. Is that something he talks about a lot?
No.
Oh, yeah, no. So that was a new thing for you all. Okay, so that's cool. Sacred
He
geometry.
talks a lot more about anthropology kind of things.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Those masks, that's good stuff. There we go. Oh, I'm going to trip myself on this. So the 7 planets go out, and they did not consider the Earth to be a planet. Now, why? This is really cool. You can maybe win, Jeopardy or something if you know this. The word planet in Greek, I wonder if you remember, Marcy. In Greek, planete means a wanderer, something that moves. So they didn't believe the Earth was a planet because they didn't believe it moved. Right? And there were 7 planets. They also called them 7 spheres. And they rotated around the Earth, again in those concentric circles. And they believed that all those spheres were fixed in crystal. Like crystal that you can see through. This beautiful crystal. And this crystalline, they called them the crystalline spheres. And they rotated, right? And as they rotated super fast, they would hum. Like they would give off a humming sound. And the 7 planets together, as they rotated in their spheres, produced a beautiful celestial harmony that they called, have you ever heard it? It's called the music of the spheres. Right? That's the song that the universe sings. And they also believed that on each one of the planets was like an angel, a sort of intelligence, they called it. And sometimes that angel would also sing. And all together, they would form that music. But we don't hear it because we've been hearing it all our lives and we don't appreciate it anymore. Our ears are so dull that we no longer hear the music of the spheres. But when you fall in love and you stare into your beloved eyes, you can do that tonight, and stare into your beloved eyes, if you listen carefully, you will hear the music. Did your husband hear the music of the spheres when he mentioned it? Hey, you can ask him, okay? But again, we're so mundane. Mundane means literally mundo, the earth in Spanish, right? We're of the earth. We're mundane. We're so heavy that we've lost that sound. But that is the sound it listens to. And, okay, Pythagoras, you've all heard of him because of the Pythagorean theorem. Well, he was also like a sort of cult leader. And he was one of the early Westerners who believed in reincarnation. Today we think of that mostly Hinduism and Buddhism. We think of the East. A few New Age people here. So Shirley MacLaine, something like that. But in the West, and even Plato, people debate whether he believed it or not, but he certainly talks about it in the Republic and other places. But what Pythagoras believed was so beautiful that we die and we keep coming back, and we will keep coming back to another life until our soul is so attuned to the universe that we hear the music of the spheres. And as soon as we hear it, our soul escapes from this heavy world. It's not pulled down again. It's a beautiful concept of this celestial harmony, right? Now, there were 7 spheres and their planets. And the first planet is something we don't consider to be a planet today. But what's the closest thing to us that moves?
The moon.
The moon. Okay, they consider the moon a planet because it moved. So the first one was the moon. Again, this is the Earth, but it's not a planet. Right? And then, for us as well, what comes after the moon? What's the next planet? You guys don't know your planets?
She said Mars. I
She said Mars. So.
Now, what did she say?
I said Mars.
No, oh,
She said Mars.
yeah, not
I
Mars.
said Mars.
Mercury, thank you. Now, for us, that's the first planet, right? After us, because we don't consider the moon a planet. The first one is Mercury, right? So, after the Earth is moon, and then Mercury, okay? And then what's next for us too?
Mercury, Venus, Earth.
Ah, there you Mr. What, some, whatever his name was. Mercury, then Venus, okay? Now, what comes next for us?
Saturn.
You know, I guess maybe I confused you, and I did say what's closest to the Earth, didn't I? I'm sorry, I confused you. I should have said what's closest to the Sun. After Venus, we would put the Earth, but what do you think they would obviously put there? What's that? No, not Jupiter yet. If the Earth is at the center, what do you think they're going to end up putting where the Earth is? That's actually where they put the Sun. Now, that's a little bit confusing. We certainly don't consider the Sun a planet either. And then afterwards comes Mars, then comes Jupiter, and then comes Saturn. Okay, and those are the 7 planets: Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Right, and they had symbols for all of them.
And they is who again? They,
Oh, the medievals. And not just the medieval, the ancient world and the medieval world, all the way up. And even once they put the sun at the center instead of the earth, they still have a view that's ordered like this and meaningful. And, you know, it's really not till you really get to, what's his name, Newton and the Enlightenment, then you start getting this clockwork universe. But it's still a universe full of meaning and full of beauty as we move all the way up to the top. And all of these planets had symbols, and all of you know at least 2 symbols for Mars and Venus. You know what the symbols are for male and female?
oh,
Yeah, and that actually is. So they believe that men are from Mars and women are from Venus back then, because the Venus, that's the symbol for Venus, and that's for Mars. And there's different ones. There's one for, I don't even remember all of them. But they all have little symbols like that. Good?
So, during the time of when Lucy and Edmund and Eustace and all them
Right.
were alive, is this what...
Oh no! I mean, all of this is medieval, but Narnia is a very medieval world.
Okay.
It's like going to the Red Fest, which I'm not going to go to this for the first time in a long time. I'm not going.
That's my parents' backyard.
Oh, you live in Magnolia?
My
Or-
mom.
Oh wow! I love that place. I love that place. We go every year, but not this year. I'm not getting tickets.
Yeah,
That's
they
just
close
so-
at the beginning of the year, and my stepdad always says, because he's lived up there for years, and he's like, oh, it's rent-a-cart season.
Oh, and they probably don't like there's traffic everywhere too.
Yeah,
Probably
but
drives
the
them
people
crazy.
that are like really hippie and
Yeah, they're
they're
odd
out
dudes.
there, yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun. I love going there because, you know, a lot of, you know, like the real conservative Christians, you know, will love going, but the really wild people go too. And I look around like, I don't have anything in common with these people. What am I doing here? But we just love it. I mean,
Well, who doesn't like someone just wearing chainmail?
there we go. That's right.
I know I do.
Crazy stuff. So no, in Lewis's day, you know, right up to today, we've got the system we have now. But Narnia is a medieval place. And before Lewis wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, I can't remember if somebody said they read. Did you say you read the space trilogy, the sci-fi?
It's been a while.
Yeah, because he wrote a trilogy. The first one's called Out of the Silent Planet, and he actually visits Mars, what he calls Malacandra, and then the second book is called Paralandra, which is what he calls Venus, and then later on it's on the Earth. Oh, come on in! We're just kind of getting started. Good. He's been bothering her. He keeps staring at her. Yeah, just be careful with the.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So you're here to protect her.
I'll protect her.
Did you get it fixed? I hope, or on the way to
No,
being
I had
fixed?
to I turned off the water recycling pump and turned off the whole heater. And hopefully Steve will be there soon.
Oh, okay.
But no.
Sorry, darling.
Well, hey, we're taking you to the fly me to the moon, and actually, you and Marcy are the two that will remember this because we talked about it with Dante.
Oh, that's
So
right.
we're
Yeah.
talking about how the Earth is at the center, and there were 7 spheres, the 7
Right.
planets: Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, all the way on up. Okay. Now, what does this have to do with Narnia? In the medieval system, they believed that as the planets rotated, that they sent down influence on the earth. Literally, and a lot of this is even tied to astrology. And I mean, first of all, if you go to to get your horoscope, do you know there's one piece of data you have to know, or you can't get your horoscope? And you know what that is? Good, your birthday. You have to know and if you can tell them what hour you're born, they're even happier. Because basically the whole way a horoscope works is, what did the night sky look like when you were born? Because the idea is that certain conjunction of planets and stars and everything else put an influence on you that influence you for the rest of your life. Now, do you know how the famous St. Augustine in the City of God disproved astronomy? He said if astronomy was true, the horoscope was true, then if you had a twin brother or sister, the two of you should have exactly the same fate. Right? Because you were born. And it was like, this can't be true, right? 1 minute doesn't really make a difference. But he actually talks about that in City of God. It's funny. But again, it was this idea that the universe influences us. And
Wait, was that a book?
say,
What were you saying?
oh, The City of God by St. Augustine?
It's a book?
Yeah, it's a book. It's a very long book. Very long book called The City of God. It's a little bit of political science, history, theology, philosophy, everything mixed together. Did you do that in one of your classes?
I read some chapters.
You read some chapters? Yeah, very, very influential book. And they teach it here a lot. Did you have Dr. Garbarino? He loves teaching that.
No, I read it with Dr.
Oh, which one? Oh, you had Lisa. Oh, he's fun. He's a nice guy. California. And, yeah, he's fun. So,
St.
so
Augustine.
what I'm going to show you now is the influence that every one of these planets has, because that influences the Narnia books. And this is kind of at the core of what Michael Ward's book tells us. So let's look at them one by one. And what I like about this is, as we look at the influences, it's going to teach you a little bit of etymology of words. A lot of words that you'll recognize, but didn't kind of know where they came from. And I always love word etymology. So the first one is the moon. I'll work my way down, okay? And the moon, now you can probably figure this out. What effect does it have on people? It makes us what? Just think of the word, how do you say moon in Spanish? Luna, and it's pretty similar. It makes us crazy. What's the word? Lunatic, okay? That is where the word lunatic or lunacy comes from. Comes from there, because the Latin is almost the same as the Spanish there. So if you're born under the moon, if you're born under the influence of the moon, it causes lunacy. And a lot of people say people do get a little crazy. It's a full moon now, isn't it? People go crazy. A lot of people say more babies are born under the full moon, and then doctors say, no, that's not true. That's a superstition, but I don't know. You think so? Right? So, lunacy, and that's the influence it has on us, but it also has an influence on nature, and it produces a certain metal in nature. So that influence, again, hits people and hits the earth and draws things out. So it draws lunacy out of us, but out of the earth. Now, I'll help you figure out what metal it produces, right? What monster is linked to the moon? What famous monster?
The werewolf.
The werewolf, right? Even a man who is pure at heart and says his prayers by night can become a wolf when the moon when the wolfbane blooms and the harvest moon shines bright. And how do you kill a werewolf? Silver. Okay, so the moon produces silver. Right? So that's the influence it has. And that is the origin of our word influenza, because they used to believe it was bad air. And of course now, the coronavirus is, in a sense, bad air. That's kind of funny. The aerosol right coming out of our mouth. But that's why you've all seen those pictures of people during the plague wearing those big funny masks, and they would have like a beak that they would fill with roses or something like that.
The filter.
The filter.
Saying the plague and how we look now,
I know.
around, it's sort of the same.
It is the same, We're trying, and they believe that don't hang around cemeteries because there's bad air, miasma they called it. And of course, they didn't know anything about germs or anything, but they had that sense. And again, when it comes down and influences it can bring sickness sometimes. So, if you're born under the moon, this is going to happen. Now, the next one is Mercury. Okay, now, I want you to really think about this hard. What metal do you think Mercury produces?
That's the difficult.
Mercury! That was a hard one, right? You know what the other fancier name for Mercury is? What's that?
Like,
You ever heard Mercury called Quicksilver?
oh, yeah.
That's another name for Mercury, is Quicksilver. And Mercury is a really weird element. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah.
If you put it in your hand, well, you'll die if you put it in your hand, but it'll get you sick. But it's like almost something in between a liquid and a solid. It's really weird. It's like what that evil robot in Terminator 2 is made out of.
Absolutely, that's what I was
It's like liquid metal, right? It moves. It's a very... Oh, hey, good. Come on. It's okay. No, I knew you were coming. Hey, good. See, we're
Oh,
out here.
glad you could make it.
He's going to give you a hard time.
Convenience.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Don't worry, man. Hey, is Bel Air getting a new building soon?
Yes.
I thought somebody told me that.
I
What?
thought it finished.
I know, so we're supposed to be moving in. At the beginning of next semester.
Okay.
But it's gonna be done in.
Where is the new? Is it close?
It's right on
It's
campus.
in Ireland.
It is a.
So it's gonna be like done in stages.
It's like the Chihuahua again.
So a portion of the teachers are going to move into the new building.
Oh my.
And then the other portion is going to stay in the old building until that other section is completed.
Oh man.
So next school year, everything should be completed,
Okay.
but only half the teachers moving over to the new building.
Man. That's how I got to get out to Bel Air again, because one time I did go to Bel Air and do my little thing where I dress up as Odysseus and tell the story of the Odyssey. And I came to Bel Air once a few years ago.
Go home. Smell you later.
So, okay, now, if you are born under the influence of Mercury, you become mercurial. Have you ever heard that word?
Yes.
Don't use it
Yes.
much. Mercurial means, it means you're always on the move. It sounds like lunacy, but not so much crazy, but you're never satisfied. You're moving here and there and stuff like that. Now, Mercury, also known as Hermes, right, is the god of what? What god is he? You know what he does? Mercury or Hermes?
Messenger?
He's the messenger of the gods, right? He's got the little winged slippers. And so you know, the people that are mercurial, sometimes Mercury is called the patron of profit. Because a lot of people that are mercurial will go on ships and risk the sea to bring back, precious spices and stuff like that. Right? That's why America was found, right? They were trying to get to those spices of India more quickly. Right? And didn't I tell you about the British explorers? They go all around the world to bring back expensive and rare spices that they then do not use in their food. You know that joke.
Very true, though. Super horrible.
If it wasn't for the Indians, there would be no spice in London, you know. They had a little more interest, right? So, now, I want you to think about this. If you're mercurial, you'll take to the sea, you'll risk yourself, you'll go on trips and all that sort of voyages. Can you think of a profession that has the word Mercury in it?
Mercenaries?
Oh, I didn't even think about mercenary.
Yeah. That's how you do
Same
it.
thing though, if you're going out.
Yeah, that I have to look that up. I never thought about mercenary, but it could be. I'd have to look that up. I have to really think about that one. But it could be. That would make sense. Huh.
Very small.
Oh, I want to look that up. That's possible. Can you think of another one? M-E-R-C, did you say it?
Merchant.
Merchant, right? And the word merchant and mercantile. You're probably right. Mercantile, mercenary. Actually, I'll look it
He
up.
saw those that he contributed. He saw those that he contributed, though.
See, he thinks doing pretty good. I don't even think about that one. Again, merchants their patron saint is Mercury. He watches over them and keeps them safe and stuff. So you're mercurial, you're running, you're all over the place, right? Then the next one we said
Mercury's a
is
saint? Mercury's not a saint.
Saint Mercury. There must be a name.
He's God.
Yeah, he's a guy. Yeah, I mean,
He's not a saint.
yeah, I mean, there is a Saint Dennis, and Dennis is a version of Dionysus. So
Yeah.
there were some people named that because they're
Okay.
Greek names too. But
I'm
is there a
gonna say
saint?
Mercury?
Mercury?
I'm gonna look it up.
That would be interesting. Or something close to that. Huh. You get Mercutio.
That's it.
Okay. Now Venus, we can figure out what that makes us.
That's it. Sexy.
Sexy, right? Lovers. And then the word for that in Latin is amor or amorous.
But that counts, my dear.
What's that?
I love you. This language you speak is wonderful. But that
I
counts.
can imagine him singing that. Remember that song? Of all the girls I loved before. Remember? What was it? Julio Iglesias? I can see him doing an imitation of that right
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Now, does anybody know what metal is produced by Venus? Okay, now, Venus, or Aphrodite, right, was the one that was born out of the shell. The shell, you've seen that picture, the famous Botticelli of the birth of Venus, right? And she's rising up in the half shell, and she was born just off the island. Does anybody know an island that's half Greek and half Turkish? Not Crete, you're close. The one that's being still fought over today. It's split down the middle. Greeks on one side, Turks on the other. You know?
We should know.
Wait, what book was it in?
Didn't we talk about it in the maps all the way when we were talking about all the Voyagers we did, because we looked at the maps.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder if we did. I mean, Crete is probably what you're thinking about. But farther away from Crete is the island of Cyprus. Have you heard of Cyprus? Right? Cypriots and stuff like that. So just think of something that sounds like Cyprus would be spelled with a U, so it would be more like cuprous. Does that sound like something? Copper, okay? And copper is the metal that Venus produces. Then the sun, okay? And the sun is the royal golden planet, and so its metal is gold. Right? The sun. And, okay, you all heard of alchemy before? Okay, the idea of alchemy is sort of capturing the power of the sun so that you can take base metals and turn them into gold. That's what the alchemists tried to do by purifying things and ultimately using the alchemical power of the sun, that it would sort of grab it and reduce it down. And then if you could do that, if you could find a way to turn base metals into gold, that becomes the elixir of life, or the also known as the philosopher's stone, that it not only turns things to gold, but it elongates your life. Right, the elixir of life, right? Does anybody know what novel has the word philosopher's stone in it in the British version?
Harry Potter.
Yeah, the original title is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, but since they thought Americans were too stupid, they changed it to Sorcerer's Stone, okay? But the original, if you get a copy of the book published in England, and if you watch the movie in Britain, you'll see that it'll say philosopher or sorcerer. I can't remember which they did first and changed. I thought that was kind of cool. So that's all linked to the sun. Now, the sun makes you generous, and it makes you wise, and it makes you liberal as in generous. Sweet. Did the debate happen yesterday? I was too busy. Is it worth watching, or was it bad? What's that?
It was child's play.
It was
totally awful.
Oh my God! But they actually did it, like face to face.
They did. It would have been better if they had boxing gloves on.
Oh my gosh!
Debate? Oh, that was terrible. This gave me anxiety.
Well, it didn't solve anything.
It didn't solve any. Oh well, I don't know.
I mean,
Let's see if I can watch it.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it happened. I thought it was getting canceled. So generous, wise. The philosophers are the people that are born under the and that's why. First of all, do you know what the great theologians are called? The what of the church? You've probably heard the phrase, the doctors of the church. And that's why that's the origin of the word PhD means doctor of philosophy. So the original PhDs were not doctors, medical doctors, we think, but the philosophers, the theologians, the Aquinas and people like that. And in Dante's Paradiso, in his paradise, these are all levels, and different saints are there. So in Dante's moon, the level of the moon, that's the lowest level in his paradise, are the people who were inconstant to their vows. They were good, but they broke their vows, they got nervous, and he puts them there. And over here, in Mercury, are the ambitious people who chose the life of action and ambition rather than like being a monk or a nun. And they're there. And then in Venus are the lovers, okay, not adulterous lovers, but lovers. And then they would be somewhere else. And then the sun, that's where the doctors of the church are. That's where we meet Aquinas and Boethius and all these famous philosopher theologians, John Chrysostom, and Nathan's there, like the guy from the Old Testament. Really neat stuff. Okay, so that's the sun. The next one is Mars. Okay. I think you can guess what Mars makes you. Okay, angry, did you say?
Yeah.
Like a warrior. And you know what word we use that comes from Mars? What's if you have this spirit? Probably heard the word martial before, spelled with a T. Doesn't mean, yeah, doesn't, well, martial too, right? But martial, like a martial song, is a military song when it's spelled that way. So it makes you martial, and some of you can probably guess the metal that is produced by Mars. Can you guess? It's the metal of weapons.
Steel.
Steel, well, but
Iron.
iron. I don't know if we've invented steel yet. So, and that's the iron, the red planet that produces iron, that red iron. Then the next one was Jupiter. Okay. And Jupiter is the king. Jupiter is Zeus. So that's the kingly planet. And this is the one that just doesn't work in our day, because it produces a metal that back then would have been so shiny and king-like. But today, because all of our canned soup is made out of this, it's lost its allure. What are not aluminum? They didn't have aluminum, but tin. Okay. Tin. You know how the British pronounce aluminum? They meant aluminium. Do they do that in Iran too? Do they say aluminium or aluminum? That's what they're probably the same way as the British do. Yeah, aluminium. That's kind of funny.
That down.
It's like the version, like my daughter, we call her a living jukebox, because if you say any phrase that's in a song, she'll start. You can just push her nose and just start singing. So he's like a jukebox. Now, does anybody know the other name for Jupiter? Not Zeus, but Jupiter is known also by a shorter name. You know what it is? It also starts with a J. Jove. Okay, and this is a very important word, and it will become very important for Lewis. If you're born under Jupiter, you are jovial. And that word still exists, but it's not used as much. And jovial, it does mean happy, but it's more than happy. It's full of joy, full of hope and optimism and promise and life. Jovial is wonderful. You want to be born under... Mars is not a good star to be born under generally, planet. But Jupiter is good. It brings what they used to call the halcyon days. It brings peace and all that sort of stuff. It's wonderful. I mean, the best things to be born under are generally the Sun and Jupiter. Venus is pretty good if you want to get a lover. But you don't want to be born under Mars. It's always very bad. And the one you really don't want to be born under is Saturn. Right? And there's a word that we still use that comes from Saturn. Do you know what that word is? It defines a character type. We don't use it much, but it's still there. And it's Saturnine. And Saturnine does not mean like a satyr running around. It's different than that. Saturnine, heavy, depressed, melancholy, and the lead, I just said it, it produces lead. And actually, if you look up Saturnism in the Saturnine, it also means lead poisoning. Now, while just showing how deep it's still in the language. But so, again, Saturn makes you heavy, melancholy. It produces wars, disease, plague. Actually, we're living in the age of Saturn right now. 2020 is definitely a Saturnine year. If we ever go back to the jovial, that would be wonderful. I mean, the seven are jovial. Right? Your area of the world is jovial. So you need to infect, a good kind of infection. Now, I mentioned influence, right? But influence is not a one-way thing, because it also depends on how we receive the influence. So I want you to think about this. If I have two things, if I have some mud over here and I have some wax over here, and I let the sun shine on them. As the sun shines on the mud, what will it become, the mud? Hard. It'll become hard, brittle, dry, right? But if you shine the sun on the wax, what will it become? It'll become soft, supple, and malleable. So it depends how we receive. So in other words, to make an obvious thing, when the influence of Mars comes on you, it can make you martial in the sense of a great soldier, or even in the Christian sense, a martyr, because sometimes the martyrs are also there. But if you receive that influence badly, you can become a tyrant, Uncle Miraz or something like that. So there is a two-way street here, how we receive these influences, right? And these are the seven things. Now, this is really fun. I'm going to show you how we are encountering these seven things all the time. Start again. Can you think of something where the cycle of seven keeps repeating itself?
The week.
Yeah, the days of the week. Okay? Yeah. In English, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, running out of room, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But I want to show you on the other side, in Romance language, I'll use Spanish because I know Spanish, but it's true for Spanish or French or Italian. Okay? Lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes, remembering days of the week, sábado, and domingo. Like I said, it's almost exactly the same. I'll bet you can say it in French. Marcy, you know French? What is it in French? Marty. Like Mardi Gras? Oh, see, it's very similar. I know. What is it? Lunedì, martedì, I can't remember. That's Italian. But really beautiful stuff. Now, I want you to show this because this is really cool. Okay. So, Monday, I think it's pretty easy to see what that is. That's the moon. Okay? And of course, lunes, where does that come from? It comes from the word luna. Okay? So, it is the moon. Okay, now, Tuesday, can you see a planet hiding in the word Martes? Mars. Okay? Now, here's where it gets weird. Even though we name our week after the planets, we in English we use the Norse versions rather than the Greco-Roman version. So Tuesday is actually Tyr day, and Tyr is the Norse god of war. Like the ring cycle and all that sort of stuff. So Tyr is the god of war. So Tuesday or Martes. Miércoles, can you see something hiding in there? You never saw it before. Mercury, did you know that? Mercury's hiding in Miércoles. This is really cool. Okay? Now, Mercury. Okay. Now, you ever find that a weird spelling? Wednesday? You know what Wednesday comes from? The word, it comes from Odin's day. That's how we end up with that strange spelling. So Wednesday is Odin's day, or Wotan, if you know the Wagner version, okay? Wotan, I think, is German. Odin is the Scandinavian, right? And Odin, now this may kind of confuse you, but Odin is always doing what? He's always wandering around, right? So Odin gets linked to Mercury because they're both wanderers and moving around and, in disguise and stuff like that. So that's Wednesday. Then Jueves, can you see something hiding?
Jupiter.
Well, Jupiter, or more specifically, Jove. Jove, yeah. But Jueves is Jove, but it's Jupiter. I just think that's cool when I suddenly realize this. And Thursday is really what? Whose day? Come on, who's the best known Norse god? You see? Who's got a hammer? Thor. Okay, Thursday is Thor's day. Did you know that? That's really cool. And Thor, with his hammer, Thor has a hammer because what does he control? He controls the power of the what?
Thunder.
The thunder and lightning, right? And that's also what Jupiter or Zeus has. That's what makes them the strongest one, because they control the power of lightning, thunder and lightning, right? Thunder and lightning, very, very frightening. No. Stupid song. Okay. Yeah, you got it. So, Thursday, and then Viernes, what's hiding in there? Isn't that cool? We never knew this before, right? Now, this is something that really annoys me, is I am the sponsor, I've been for a long time, I have been the sponsor of the English Honor Society. It's called Sigma Tau Delta, or what for short? STD, okay. Now, why did they name this STD? Well, it's like 75 years old, okay? We remember, what did they call it in our day, Paula? We didn't call it STD. Yeah, venereal disease, or VD, okay? And now it's sexually transmitted disease. Now, I've not been able to prove this, but I think the reason they changed it, do you know what venereal disease means? It means diseases of Venus, okay? And
This is the girls.
yeah, well, no, that's what's good, but I mean, sexual, basically, right? But so you see, so why would our modern world not like calling them the diseases of Venus? Because it's got a moral connotation to it. That was the whole point. And so they're trying to take out that by just calling it sexually transmitted. And I'm told that now they call them sexually transmitted infections, apparently. SDI. So that would be nice if we can get rid of the, humiliating STD. That's how we get people to join. It's like, come get an STD, that kind of stuff. Anyway, so now Friday, okay. Friday is
Venus.
it's Venus, okay, but where's Fry? It is, well, there's two reasons that people debate. It's either short for Frigg or Freya, and those are both goddesses of love in the Norse side. That's the Norse version of Venus or Aphrodite. So isn't that really cool?
Yeah, so I have to
Good.
put in a linear story. I went through all Catholic schools here.
Oh, okay.
And so we were having a similar conversation, and one of the boys said, well, we were in Lent, so you can't eat meat. So they
Okay.
called Friday, because that's when we fry the fish.
Oh, that's cute. Okay. Okay.
Stupid.
That's pretty fun. Remember that, though. I like that. That's right, yeah. The fish fry. That was it.
No, I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
No.
I thought there was something more juicy.
After messing with the water heater, there's nothing different.
Catholic school, old girls,
Yes.
Nine wonders.
I can just tape this and, and just sell it and retire. I mean, this is great stuff.
Totally good.
It's great. You guys are missing all the good stuff over here. Anyway, so we've got Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and then this is pretty easy in English. Saturday and Sunday. Now you know it's Saturn Day and Sunday. But this is really cool. And you could give a whole sermon on this, because my big thing is bringing Athens and Jerusalem together, the Judeo-Christian, the Greco-Roman, all that sort of stuff. In Spanish, French, and Italian, this is Greco-Roman, right? So the days of the week, the weekdays, as we call them, are the Greco-Roman gods. But of course, where does the word Sabado come from? Sabbath, okay? It's a Sabbath, right? So you've got the Jewish influence there. Sabado is Sabbath. And then Domingo, you know what that means in what does Dominus mean? Domino?
Santu, so Holy Spirit is the holy day, right?
No, but what does Dominus mean? Double. Well, dominion, it means Lord. Okay? So it's the Lord's day. Why is Sunday the Lord's day? Well, no, that's Sabbath.
That's when we go to church.
Okay, we go, but why? Remember, the Jews go on Saturday. Why did the Christians change to Sunday?
To worship?
Why? Why Sunday? What happened on Sunday?
I guess he rose.
Yeah, rose from the dead. Okay, so the Lord's Day is the day that Jesus rose. So what I'm saying is, it's so cool in the Romance languages. We have the Greco-Roman and the Judeo-Christian right there, which is just kind of cool, right? I can say a little sermon right there. But here in English, coming from German, okay, because remember, English is a mixture of the Germanic languages and then the Latin languages coming in, right? And they mix together. And the Latin stuff is where we got all our multisyllabic words generally, and most of the Germanic words are Beowulf, So, all right. So now we've got our 7 days, and now I'm going to show you how they link up to the Narnia Chronicles, and then we'll talk about them as we go through them. Okay. But Moon is as we'll see in a moment, it is the silver chair, and you might have guessed that since the moon causes silver. That's the most obvious one, and we'll talk about it when we get there. Mars, though, is the Prince Caspian book, and we'll talk about that. That's the Martial Chronicle. Right? Mercury is going to be the horseman's boy, which we haven't got to yet. And we'll talk about it as we get to each one. Jupiter, or Jove, is the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Okay? Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I'm out of order. That's why it's weird to me. Venus is going to be the magician's nephew. Saturn is going to be the last battle. And then Sunday, the Sun is going to be Voyage of the Untitled Chapter. And we'll talk about these. And what I want to do first is just talk about why it is that Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is the Jupiter book, or the jovial book, and why Prince Caspian is the martial book. And some of what Michael Ward came up with, I think it's just brilliant. Okay, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Okay, first of all, it would be easy to refute Michael Ward's theory, because of course, when Lewis wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, what did he not know he was going to do?
Write all the other.
Write all 7, right? Okay, so, but I think that Ward is right, because Lewis was very much an apologist for the jovial spirit in a Saturnine age. Right? He was living in a time that was, again, all very pessimistic, very dark, very materialistic. It's like the jovial spirit had been killed. Right? You've all heard of Eleanor Roosevelt, married to Franklin Roosevelt. Well, I don't remember. I'm not that old, but I've heard it, that she went to the Soviet Union. You know, she did a lot of traveling. She was probably the busiest first lady probably in our history. She traveled a lot, and she came back and she gave a report about the Soviet Union. I'll never forget that. At the end, she said that, but the strangest thing about my trip is I was there for 2 weeks, and in all the time I was there, I never heard anyone. Can you fill in the blank? Guess. You got it. I never heard anyone laugh. You know, again, we remember the Soviet. Nobody laughed. I mean, there's no spirit of joviality, or at least it's hidden. Right? And again, one of the reasons people look down on fairy tales and children's literature is they thought it was childish, jovial, but they looked down on it. Right? This idea that the more educated you become, the more cynical you become. Right? And we're going to see a lot of that cynicism in the last battle with the dwarves and stuff when we get there. So what I'm saying is that it would make sense that if Lewis wrote a children's novel, he would start. Just be careful not to trip. I'm on a short leash here. It makes sense that he would start by trying to resuscitate a jovial spirit. And one of the reasons I love his book is that it gives the best explanation for one of the strangest aspects of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. In the time when C.S. Lewis was living, writing, after World War II and all, there was only one figure left in England that was a perfect and pure embodiment of the jovial spirit. Can you guess who that is? Who is the person that doesn't really belong in Narnia? It makes no sense that he's there, but he's there. Yeah, Father Christmas, right? It makes no sense for Father Christmas to be there because there's no character named Christ to have Christmas, right? But now, I said before, and I still think this is part of it, that Lewis couldn't give that up because he loved the phrase, always winter but never Christmas. But Michael Ward, I think, gives a deeper answer. We need Father Christmas because he's the last remnant of the jovial spirit. He just captures that perfect. And in the movie, they did that well. The actor they got to play him really captured the jovial spirit. And it really is. I mean, even though England is very much a sort of post-Christian culture, there are Christians there, but I mean, but they still love Christmas more so than we do in some ways. I mean, everything. I mean, if you ever watch, if you ever watch TV series from England, they will almost always have a Christmas special. They love all their Christmas. And of course, they sing Christmas carols more beautiful than we do, because they sing the more, what do I want to say, the more classical ones and stuff like that, and all different harmonies and things like that. They just love the jovial spirit, and that was perfect. That's why you have to have Father Christmas with the red and the white, as we said before. That captures it. Also, Jove is the kingly planet, and so jovial is linked to kingship, right? And how does, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe begins with what? Hanging in a wardrobe. Yeah, coats, but like really fancy coats, dress coats, hanging, and it ends with the what? What happens at the end? Well, before the hunting of the white stag, what is the real climax of Lion, the Witch? Okay, what's that?
The witch with the lion's mane?
No. In the novel, they defeat the White Witch, and then what is the great event that sort of climaxes it? Aslan goes to Cair Paravel and
breathes on the stone figures.
Stone figures, and then, but that's not where it ends. Where does it end? Let me say it again. So before they grow up, it all ends. After the battle is all over, then Aslan takes them to Cair Paravel, and what does he do to the children?
He knights them.
Knights them, and?
What she was saying.
This is, I couldn't quite hear you. Say it again?
I thought that, he gives them titles, like the Civil Constellarian.
Oh, yes, good. And he does that because he is crowning them. Okay, I want to get there. And you're right. He gives them names, right? And we call that a coronation, but not coronavirus. Okay, but that's. I mean, you understand. If you've seen the picture of what the coronavirus looks like, it looks like a little crown. That's why it's called that. The whatever it is, what do you call that thing? Not virus. Yeah, virus. It's a virus. That's the right word. Yeah, the thing that's not really alive, but it is alive, but not alive. You know, like being a business major.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, anyway, so it ends with a coronation, and I'll never forget. He just hit the nail on the head. Michael Ward is British when he said, "Okay, have you ever read a fairy tale that said, once upon a time there was a president and first lady? How does it start? Once upon a time there was a king and a queen." Okay. Fairy tales almost always take place in a monarchical place, right? And this is, I was starting to say before about the Renaissance Festival. It's so funny because when I go to the Ren Fest, I look around and about 2/3 of the people that I see next to me would be against every single thing that the Middle Ages stood for. And yet I really believe that, especially Americans, even though we're completely against kings and all that's terrible, I think deep down there is a sense of we've lost something, a desire for a kind of beauty. Are they waiting for Emperor Cyrus to come back to in Iran? It's like waiting for a true king or queen. Even though, like I said, especially in America, we're all supposed to be democratic and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, I think that's why we're so fascinated by the royal family in America. We're fascinated. And as C.S. Lewis said, that if we're robbed of our kings and queens, we'll start worshiping celebrities, right? Sports figures, actors, rock stars, or something like that. It's interesting. There's almost something instinctual in us. And there's that wonderful moment in Lord of the Rings when, what's his name? Theoden, who's the king of the Mark, the king of Rohan, and he is exorcised and he comes back. And I can't remember if it's in the movie too, but it's certainly in the book, where he comes up and he says, "Welcome back, king." And he says, basically what he says is to, "Give me a command now, king. You know, let me be fulfilled." Remember, that's like, give me an order. Let me do that. And he couldn't do that in our world, so we have to go to a medieval world, a world that has kings and queens. In this case, 2 kings and 2 queens. So we end with crowning them. Start with fancy dress. People love getting all dressed up and things like that. And I mean, in America, it's so funny. In the Constitution, I always find this kind of amusing about the Constitution. There's a long section where in our law it says nobody is allowed to bear what kind of titles in America. It's actually in the Constitution. Yeah, like royal hereditary titles are forbidden. You can't be dukes or earl, duke, queen, that sort of stuff. That's actually, have you ever seen it? It's in the Constitution. Not allowed to. That's why, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, they did knight, I think, George Bush Sr. Didn't they knight George H.W. Bush?
The English.
Yeah, the English did. So he's Sir, but he can't use that title in America. People may say it, but he's really not allowed to use that officially. That's still so much in our blood, throwing off the king.
Well, I think we like parades. We like pageants.
That's another good catch, yeah.
And so, or at least I do. And so, I mean, I think that's where it runs over. That's why we have all the Rose Bowl parades.
That's true. We still have it.
That business. And so,
have you ever been to like a village in Mexico where they did a real Catholic parade with the huge well, they still do this in Mardi Gras, okay? But other times we have a huge Virgin Mary or something made out of paper mache, that sort of stuff. I mean, we sort of lost that. And
in like the Day of the Dead celebration.
Oh, good. I love that.
Very interesting.
I think we need Day of the Dead here. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I think it's a cool celebration.
You would. We painted you as one of those skulls, man. You look cool, man.
Mm-hmm. I actually did that.
I can just see it. I can see it.
Like,
Oh, you did paint
yeah,
yourself?
they did. There's like a costume contest up at like my Medici seat. And
Oh, that's cool. Well, don't you remember the last James Bond movie had that great opening scene at Day of the Dead? Did you see the last one? What was it called? Spectre. It's got that incredible opening scene during the Day of the Dead and all that sort of. You haven't seen that?
Yeah, no, I have, but I'm forgetting.
You've forgotten it? It's a great scene. And it's one of those scenes where the camera just keeps moving and never cuts, and he's moving all around, and it's really cool. But anyway, well, we'll stick with Coco. I love Coco. And where was I? So, and to show you how strong this is, when the French Revolution came out, and they not only killed the king and queen and family, but they decimated the Catholic Church, killed nuns, killed priests. Then they started having the same exact kind of Catholic pageants, but instead of having a giant statue of the Virgin Mary, you know what they had? A giant, do you know? No, like Mardi Gras, but they actually had a giant statue of Athena, the goddess of reason, because this was the Enlightenment. And so they still felt the need for these huge parades, right? But now it was reason that they were like an allegory of reason. They weren't trying to be pagans per se. And by the way, the other thing they did is they changed the calendar, they changed the days of the week, all of that sort of stuff. And it's interesting that I don't know. That would be interesting to see if like the Amish ever changed the days of the week or something, because they are pagan, after all. By the way, I was checking to see if this was also true in Portuguese, which is a rather ugly language. And in Portuguese, it actually, they've got Sunday, and then in Portuguese, it's basically second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day. That's what it translates. So I was looking this up just to check, because I was checking. The other ones are the same, like I said, French and Italian, but in Portuguese, that's what it is. It's like, come on, you can't think of anything better than that. What's that?
It's the same in Persian.
Oh, it is the same, really?
Yes.
That's interesting. I wonder what that goes back to. That's interesting. Huh. So it's second, they're all first, second, third, or?
First, second, third, fifth, Friday and Saturday are different names.
Different names. Saturday and Sunday, or they're just Saturday?
No, just Saturday and Friday.
And Friday, but isn't Friday the special day for Muslims?
Yes.
That's right, just like Saturday is special for Jews and Sunday for Christians. Friday is special for Muslims, that's right. So that makes sense. So that's interesting. So the beginning and end of the week are different with the Saturday and Sunday. So that's just wild, Anyway, day of rest. See, we're lucky we get a double day of rest in America. None of this 6 days a week. Although most of our grandparents work 6 days a week, but we're lucky to get the 5-day week. Kind of cool, Anyway, okay. So again, and what Michael Ward's got, I think he's so right, is that Lewis is not upfront about this because he wants us, when we read these books, to experience what it means to be jovial. In other words, without it being so much I'm explaining it now, but without intellectualizing it, we are feeling not only what it is to live in the medieval age, but we're feeling what it means to be under Jupiter. And what he was trying to get at is why the Chronicles move us so much. They take, part of it, of course, is Aslan, but another part is, and it's just funny that once he did this, a lot of snooty critics started taking the Chronicles more seriously. Because it was like, now we see it's more intellectual. It's sort of like when the movie, does anybody remember a movie called Apocalypse Now? Did you ever see that? Francis Ford Coppola? It came out and the critics were so-so. And then one critic discovered that this was basically the Heart of Darkness reset during Vietnam. And then suddenly all the critics, it was the greatest movie. They went wild. And so it's that kind of thing. But I think it helps. Like I said, if it was just silly, but I think it actually illuminates elements of it and brings it. Now, let me show you how amazing this is. And this, by the way, I've met Michael Ward, and this is when he made the discovery. When Lewis was younger, I think he was in his 20s or something, he actually wrote a poem. He wrote a lot of poetry in the beginning, called The Planets, where he talks about all the planets. And he said he was in his dorm room reading, and he said it was the aha moment, right? Not a forced one, but the real aha moment when he read these words. This comes from the section of his poem, The Planets, that's about Jove, about Jupiter. And look what he says: of wrath ended and woes mended, of winter past and guilt forgiven and good fortune, Jove is master. And he said, that's about the best two-sentence description of Lion the Witch. Let me read it again. This is like a description of Lion the Witch and Wardrobe. Of wrath ended, of woes mended, of winter past, and guilt forgiven, and good fortune, Jove is master. Sounds a little bit like wrong will be right when Aslan comes at sight, right? When he shakes his mane, when he bares his teeth, winter meets its death. And when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again. And the poem goes on. I'll read the whole thing now. Of wrath ended and woes mended, of winter past and guilt forgiven, and good fortune, Jove is master, and of jocund revel, laughter of ladies, get the whole court, the lion-hearted, that's kind of cool that that's in there, the myriad-minded, men like the gods, helps and heroes, helms of nations, just and gentle are Jove's children. Where did we hear just and gentle? We kind of touched on it before, Marcy. Yeah, Edmund the just, and Susan the gentle. And then it's Lucy the valiant and Peter the brave? I think it's brave, yeah. So, I mean, this is pretty amazing. That was the light bulb, he said, when he read that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that, again, it reads like the what do you call those? The cliff notes, you know, the short little notes of what Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is. So again, we get to join and experience that move. And by the way, what is unique about the planet Jupiter? What does it have that you can recognize it right away?
The rings.
Oh, that's Saturn.
Oh.
The big spot in the
Yeah. What color is it? It's like a big red blind. We'll definitely say like 100 Earths can fit in that hole. I don't know what it is, but that big red spot.
The size of the Earth.
Or just the size of the Earth? Okay, maybe that was it.
Jupiter is
Oh.
150 times the size of the Earth.
Wow. So maybe you could fit like a few Earths in that thing. And anyway, I remember Michael Ward was saying that he had found a place where Lewis always identified the red spot on Jupiter with basically the crucifixion with the blood of Christ. Because again, it's woes mended, guilt forgiven and stuff. So again, it gives another dimension, and it helps us to understand that when we read Narnia, we don't just experience it intellectually, we're experiencing it sort of emotionally, viscerally. We're taken. And each one of them is in Narnia, but they all have a different feel to them. And this is kind of what he's helping us to understand with this really neat system, very simple system. It's really cool. There's a documentary of it that I was going to show, but with all this technology, it's not going to work. But they made, and he did a cool thing. He published Planet Narnia, which has a lot more. It also has a full analysis of the Space Trilogy. It's got an analysis of his poetry. It's just a great book. But then later on, he came out with a short simplified version called the Narnia Code. I think of the Da Vinci Code. And a lot of these scholars have been doing that lately. They come out with the scholarly book that has all the notes, and then they'll come out with a little bit more accessible book. And it was called the Narnia Code. It was pretty neat. But anyway, so that's neat. So that's Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Again, best explanation for why Father Christmas is there. We're understanding it. We are asserting a kind of joy and joviality that our world is lacking, right? And think of all the parties that they throw and all that sort of stuff. It's great. Okay, now, Prince Caspian is the martial book. And Lewis was not a pacifist, okay? I wouldn't call him a hawk. But what he didn't like about modern people is like, okay, we're going to fight, but we're going to have a long face doing it. Lewis had no problem with the image of the knight, and whether it's the crusader or the knight at arms, that can be a noble thing. He wasn't, in no ways was he a, what do you call a hawk and that sort of stuff. But he would be somebody to try to restore a glory to the medieval knight. And in Prince Caspian, you notice that as the kids stay in Narnia, what happens to them in Prince Caspian? Did you notice as they're there longer? Do you remember what he says? What do they become more like? If you remember this, but they get more strong again, right? Because remember, they've been adults before, and they get hardened, battle-hardened. It is literally the martial influence of Narnia in Prince Caspian, right? So in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Aslan is a king, right? In Prince Caspian, Aslan is more of a warrior. He's kind of way. I mean, he's both, but he's more like a commander here. But the kids have to be hardened. I don't know if you remember when I read that wonderful passage where after they had the Council of War and they had the dance at the what do they call that? Dancing Lawn. At Dancing Lawn, then it says, I'll read it to you again. Remember it. It says, to sleep under the stars, to drink nothing but well water, and to live chiefly on nuts and wild fruit, was a strange experience for Caspian after his bed with silken sheets in a tapestried chamber at the castle with meals laid out on gold and silver dishes in the anteroom and attendants ready at his call. But Caspian had never enjoyed himself more. Never had sleep been more refreshing, nor food tasted more savory, and he began already to harden, and his face wore a kinglier look. So that is the martial influence on Caspian as well. Now, all the kids become knights, but you can also receive the influence bad and become a tyrant like Miraz. Okay? But this is the book that has a duel in it. I don't think any of the other books have a duel in it. This has a duel. Also, and this was brilliant. And I told Michael Ward, I said, there's just certain moments that you just blow me away. Okay, you know that we have the Greek names for the gods and we have the Roman names, right? And when I was a kid, I used to think that the Romans just took the Greek gods and changed their names. But that's not really what happened. The Romans had those gods that they then lined up with the Greek ones. That's really, in other words, they already had Jupiter. And he was most like Zeus. And so they brought, if the word is syncretistic, they brought together those things. Right? And Mars, okay, is the god of war, but there's two different Marses. The original Mars he showed, and Lewis would have known this, was actually a vegetation god. Mars Sylvanus. You know what the word Sylvan means? Is that Sylvan?
Education.
Learn.
The learning center.
Learning Center.
Oh, that's right. It is maybe there. Sylvan. You know what Sylvan means? Having to do with the woods and the forest is Sylvan, right? And so, but there's also the war Mars Gradivas, he was called, who was the Mars of war. But also, and by the way, we're told that this story takes place during the month of Greenwood, which seems to be March, right? And in fact, the name March, the day of the month, comes from Mars, right? And March is what part of the year?
Spring.
The spring, okay? And the spring is when these things start opening up. What does Prince Caspian have a whole lot of that don't really pop up that much in the other books? What do we see lots and lots of in Caspian? Mars Sylvanus. Wood, yeah, trees. What are all these trees doing? Michael Ward, what are all these trees doing? By the way, this guy, Michael Ward, who wrote this book, this is so cool. And my son had a class with him for the Masters of Apologetics. Did you ever see The World Is Not Enough? That's the one with where James Bond goes to Russia and they've got the pipeline.
Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, yes, Pierce Brosnan, yeah, with the beautiful girl who turns out to be bad. What's her name? Not Electra. That's the one with Denise Richards, who we're supposed to believe is a nuclear scientist.
Well, that doesn't work.
Yeah, that just didn't work. But anyway, in that movie, they've got M, okay, and M is always the one where you go to get your gadget. I'm sorry, Q, gadgets. And Q is breaking in a new assistant who happens to be John Cleese from Monty Python, okay? If you watch that scene again, when he goes to get his gadgets, there's this nerdy guy sitting at his desk, and he hands Bond his fancy glasses. That's Michael Ward. He's actually in the movie. Yes. So he's in the same scene with James Bond and with Q and with John. It's great, but he's actually in the movie. If you look for it, that's him. And you can see him. He's there for about a minute. I mean, he's clear, and he hands the glasses to Bond. It's wild stuff. Interesting dude. Anyway, by the way, he's a convert to Catholicism. You might know that. Yeah, he already was like an Anglican priest, but he's a Catholic priest. But he said that they've kind of agreed that they'll let him, because what he really is a priest to students. He's not he doesn't do the mass and stuff. He works with students. So I think they'll let him keep doing that.
And be a doctor of a church.
Yeah. Right.
Through education.
That he works that way. So he's really new. So he lives in Oxford, and he comes here every so often, just briefly, a few weeks a year. But he's an interesting guy. Anyway.
Is he a Legionnaire of Christ?
He might be. That sounds possible.
Of the Vatican.
Oh, I see what you mean. That's possible. I'll have to see. Next time I see him, I'll ask him. But my son took 2 classes with him. He's a really cool guy. And if you hear him talk, he's got the dry sense of humor. He's very British, you know. Anyway, so that explains why there's all these trees. It actually works with us. Because, I mean, we see trees, but they never again play such a prominent part as they do in this book, Prince Caspian, where the trees go on the march and stuff, and we miss some of that in the movie. So again, that's just again another neat explanation for why it is like this, right? Prince Caspian. If there's anything else, I've got my own notes here. Again, that's basically it, though. Yeah, but the kids have to learn to be hard. Basically, they have to learn. I think I wrote this down. They have to learn obedience, duty. They have to learn martyrdom, particularly. Remember, I told you that there are a few martyrs in a sense. There's his nurse who gets kicked out. There is Lucy, when she has to bear witness. Dr. Cornelius, too. They're the ones that bear witness. So it's got a sense of martyrdom. But it's definitely a martial book where Caspian learns how to fight from his uncle and all that stuff. Okay, now, just want you to think about this. What in the title of Voyage of the Dawn Treader gives you a link to a planet? Just look at the title.
The V.
No, not the letter, but Voyage of the Dawn Treader. The sun, okay? They're going on a long voyage to the uttermost east of the world. And what rises in the east? The sun. They tell me that. I've never been up early enough to see that. Unless I stay up all night. I used to love that when I was a college student, staying up all night. And then, because I like breakfast food, but I'm never awake for breakfast. I'd much rather sleep. But, so the only time I ever eat breakfast food is if I've been up the entire night. And then we'll have it. But you know what I discovered? It's very difficult to, if you're avoiding gluten like I am, it's very difficult to have breakfast because everything's just basically wheat. The pancakes, the waffles. Well, I guess you can have a cholesterol breakfast with all eggs. That's true. Yeah, eggs, sausage, bacon, all that stuff. Yeah, that's true. Oh, there you go. I can't figure it out. I get my oatmeal and I'll just make that in the microwave. It's easy. But whenever I try to put grits, it boils up. I even got one of those little microwave things where you close it and it's got a little air hole, and the darn stuff is popping out of the air hole. I don't know what it is. You just have to do it 30 seconds and then 20 seconds. I don't know what it is,
Because you ain't real Texas.
Yeah, you have to stir it in a pot or something. Yeah, I know. It's too long. Grits. Oh man, it's just like the switch gets turned on. Do you remember who used to say, "Kiss my grits"? Remember that? Alice, that was her name. That was that old TV show. Kiss my grits. I told you didn't I tell you all my first, I grew up in New Jersey, my first understanding of the South? My first understanding of the South was foghorn leghorn. I said, boy, that was the South. Foghorn leghorn, that was my first experience. So I haven't met any talking roosters yet, but we'll see.
Well, we could go, yes, we have.
Have you met
We've met.
Uh-oh. Who's that? Clinton. That's right. It's true, I guess, yeah.
I'll say, boy.
Paul is just like me. He makes fun of him. He's like, I really shouldn't do that. It's not very Christian, but it's Clinton. It's okay. I mean, you just.
He makes fun of me. It's all right.
It's great.
He makes fun of me.
Oh man.
Yeah, as long as he doesn't, no. I love him. It's okay.
Oh man. So anyway, Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Okay, we are trying to get to the sun. We are on the ship, and it gets brighter and brighter. By the end of this book, the kids are looking directly into the sun. They drink water that's almost like liquid sunlight. They're moving farther and farther to the sun, right? There's a lot of images of gold in this book because the sun produces gold, okay? Now, sometimes gold is good, sometimes it's a temptation, right? Depends how you receive the influence, right? Whether it's good or bad for you. Now, here's the other cool part that Michael Ward came up with. Every book has got some really cool little thing. All right, does anybody know which Greek god is linked to the sun? What famous Greek god? Which Greek god is often linked to the sun? You know?
I feel like we're all losing
Like starts with a P?
It starts with an A.
Aries. No.
What's that? Apollo, very good. Apollo is linked to the sun. I mean, there is an actual sun god known as Helios, which is the word for God. But Apollo is linked to the sun, right? And Apollo, one of the things he does is he's a dragon slayer. He kills dragons and serpents. And that's one of his titles. And there are a lot of dragons in here, okay? There's the dragon that Eustace turns into. There's the dragon that was there before. There is a dragon on the boat. You said it, good. And there's also a sea serpent. That's, in a sense, a kind of a dragon, right? So there are lots of dragons hanging around. Why? There's no dragons in any other book. But here it fits with the solar influence. He even showed me that there's one place where Reepicheep is trying to cheer up Eustace when he's a dragon, and he tells him stories, and he mentions philosophers. It's the only time the word philosopher is mentioned. And the gold, the sun, produces philosophers. Also, I don't know if you remember, but that scene after Eustace is undragoned, he's got that bracelet that finally comes off, and he gives it away. It's solar generosity, and then they just throw it, and it gets hooked up. Right? That's the solar generosity. But again, the dark side is, I want the gold, and everybody fighting over the gold. So again, gold, dragons, they're all there. And what's really cool about this is, this book also includes, as I said a moment ago, Reepicheep. How is Reepicheep different in these two books? What is he supremely in Prince Caspian?
He's a warrior.
Yeah, warrior. Very good. He's a warrior. Under the martial influence of Mars and Prince Caspian, he is a warrior. Now, it's not so much that he still has that warrior thing, but how is he different in this book? I love the way he grows.
Describes him. Hold on, let me tell you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Note
girl.
this down.
She's got it good, see?
It says, oh, wait, shoot, I didn't write down. I wrote the other thing. Hold on, it's page 430.
Oh,
Don't be neat on that. Come on, you have to be a few
I
minutes.
have
Okay, it says, a mouse on his hind legs and stood about 2 feet high, a thin band of gold.
we know what he looks
Passed
like.
around his head under one ear and over the other, and in this was stuck a long crimson feather. As the mouse's fur was very dark, almost black, the effect was bold and striking. His left paw rested on the hilt of the sword, very nearly as long as its tail. Its balance as it paced gravely along the swaying deck was perfect, and its manners courtly. So he's like a very valiant.
Okay, that's good. He is a valiant mouse,
Yeah.
right? Oh,
It
wait.
says the most valiant of all, the talking beast of Narnia.
He's wonderful. And he's a little bit... Okay, does anybody... Go.
I thought in this book that he was more like a conscious, because he was constantly pushing them to go forward and not
Good.
to turn back, not to give up, he kept prodding them. It was like, what are we doing? We can't be Narnians and walk away from this. And he kept pushing everyone to do what was just and what was right, rather than do what was safe or avoid things.
But then in the end, he wanted to be the one that stayed.
Good. And in a sense, he's going to sacrifice himself.
He wanted to.
Yeah, he's going to say he's more. Okay, first of all, remember if you're a medieval knight, you're supposed to have two qualities. You're supposed to be brave, but you're also supposed to be what? A gentleman, right? Pure, right? I mean, so the two have to go together. You're the gentleman knight, and you're pure and even pious in some ways, but you're also, well, I mean, the most famous are the, what do they call them? The Knights Templar, who are supposed to be monks at arms, which really should be an oxymoron, but, they're brave and they're pure at the same time, is this idea, right? Nightfall, did anybody watch that? It was a fun show on History Channel. Some of it was pretty good. But anyway, so here he's become, more okay, let's go back to what Clinton said. He presses them forward, not only because he wants an adventure, but what else is he trying to gain?
He really
Yeah, he wants to get to Aslan's. He wants knowledge. He is, just look at it. I mean, just a little bit after what Amanda wrote, a little bit farther. It's on page 433. Are you going to give us Reepicheep for your next thing?
It's a surprise.
Oh, it's like, oh, wait, it's good. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like I said, there's a little bit of a small, quicker break here, but then you'll have a long time for your third one. It's kind of hard to put this together. So, yeah, the next one's 2 weeks from now, but then you can sort of relax a little bit. Yeah, no problem. We can do it. We can do it. Clint's like, man, I could do mine and Lupe's and Amanda's. You know what I was thinking? What I was thinking with Clinton, did this ever happen to you? Like you're an undergrad and you've got to, like, you have to do some kind of project and you're not very good with your computer. This especially when I was younger. And there's always some computer nerd and you ask them to help you and they do help you, but they help you too much. You ever seen that? Because what you were saying about being a perfectionist, like, look, I'm fine, this looks good. No, and they're like, they're more interested than you are. And I'm always, thank you. I say, thank you, go ahead and do your best. But it's funny.
Computer proficiency exam that everybody has passed.
God, that was ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Like, there's like computer proficiency exam to graduate as an undergrad, and everybody put an all. Or like, if they failed too many times, they had to take fast.
It was ridiculous.
They would always be like, all right, we're having a study night, so it'd be like 10 people in the room.
And they all do it at the same time. That's right. They all do it on their laptop, and all of it. Nobody, because it was they finally got rid of that stupid requirement. Oh my gosh. Yeah, you remember. Oh my gosh. It's funny. So, okay, now watch, okay. Did you understand what is the reason that the Dawn Treader is going on this trip? Does anybody know the actual reason?
To bring back
You got it?
the 7.
Good, there's 7 of them too, which is a wonderful number, right? The 7 lost lords of Narnia. And does anybody remember why those 7 lords are out there in the first place? Yeah, good. You remember in Prince Caspian, it's already the seed is there, right? That he either killed them or got them on his side, and the people that he couldn't kill or bribe, he got them to go on a wild goose chase and go way out, and they never came back. And so it's been 3 years, and Caspian says, now that I've set everything to rights and got my thing in order, I've left Trumpkin behind, which we unfortunately don't get to meet him, but he's there, and now I'm going to fulfill a vow I took on the day of my coronation that I would rescue those lords. And so that's why everybody's going, but Reepicheep has a different reason. Amanda was already getting there. On page 433, it says, this is chapter 2. It's just a couple pages into chapter 2, if you have a different book. 433, that is my main intention, says Roop, but Reepicheep here has an even higher hope. Everyone's eyes turned to the mouse. As high as my spirit, it said, though perhaps as small as my stature. Why should we not come to the very eastern end of the world? And what might we find there? I expect to find Aslan's own country. It is always from the east across the sea that the great line comes to us. He basically wants to go to heaven. That's ultimately what Aslan's country is. So he's become like a, what's the word I want? He's on a quest, like the quest for the Holy Grail. So if in the first book, he's like a King Arthur or Lancelot, in this book, he's Galahad. Does anybody know who Galahad is? Yeah. He's the one.
I did notice that he every single time they have, because this book is all over the place. There's like a billion adventures. It's like a blender book. It's like
you know it is.
Ideas and you put them in the blender. It's like,
exactly.
Put all of them in this book because there's a lot happening all over the place. But Reepicheep keeps like, or we'll avenge him, or
that's right.
or we'll avenge you, or we'll and like he's like every time he gets a chance, he's telling them, or we're gonna kick their asses if they did something. Be like, let me know.
Remember his great line?
Yeah.
Maybe they become visible when we stab them.
Yeah.
He's like
ready to whip that ass over where they go. It's like I counted like 5 times.
Oh yeah, he is.
Where he's just like, hey, or we're gonna avenge.
It's weird. He's there as the courageous one, but he's a little bit comic relief too, sort of like Gimli in the Lord of the Rings movies. Gimli becomes more, but he's always pressing. And you're right. I mean, I knew that when they made this into a movie, they were going to have to change it a lot because this is a book of what we call episodic. One episode after another. Yeah, it doesn't have a very clear I guess it has a beginning, middle, and end. And that's why. Do you remember what they tried to to give it unity in the movie. It kind of worked. If you saw the movie, oh, okay. In the movie, they have to collect these 7 swords and put them together. They're just trying. They try. Boom, boom. I mean, it kind of worked. It was, but they were trying to find a way to give it more unity rather than being here and there and everywhere.
It really is all over the place.
Yeah, it is.
Like,
I like
these
it.
ideas he put in a blender, and he's like, you know what?
Yeah. It doesn't have
There's
that.
a lot of where he's talking to the person reading the book.
Right.
More so than I know.
Oh, that's a good point. You're right. He does.
Yeah.
That is an interesting point.
Or he's like directing you and saying, now if you're going to continue to read this, you're going to need to know these.
That's true.
You're going to need to like fore and aft, and there's other parts where
That is true. Yeah, he's like he sounds more like a professor. He's teaching.
Yeah, it's the most interaction where I've read any of the other stories where he's talking directly to the reader as an aside almost. It felt more like a play because there were so many acts.
Right.
And they're so visual, like in description of setting up what you see, setting up how it's happening. There's a lot more of that. Where I was like, I can see why the movie producers were like, we need to make.
Yeah, we have to find some way to make this
because you could
unified. Aristotle would be horrified.
Everything that he does it's in this book especially is so visual first. So first he's like, it looks like this. You would feel like this. If you don't know what I mean, think back to this, and then you'll know what I mean about looking down a long hallway and it starts.
Oh, right, yeah.
He says, if you don't know what I mean, then think of this, and then you'll know what I mean. And then he goes into the story, and then there's tactile, where it's talking about scent, right? And then temperature. It's all like kind of like, okay, I'm going to go off on a tangent and then bring you in slowly, and then I'll tell the story once you have all of this, information around it. It's more so than I noticed than any of the other ones that we've read.
That is true. He's more like a storyteller. And medieval stories tended to be episodic like this. And the one story that is Don Quixote, which is based on, all those. And if you read the novel, it's very loose. It's just all over the place, one adventure after another. And that makes sense.
When was this written in conjunction with Tolkien's releases? So
actually, about the same. So they came out 50, 51. So this came out in 52. And Lord of the Rings came out, I think, 52, 53, 54.
Because Lord of the Rings
so they overlapped.
Is a whole bunch of things happening until you realize that they're all supposed
That's
to
true.
Weaving,
until they come together. That is true.
Like all spread out, like it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. And then at the end, you're like, oh, wait a minute, all those things are...
That's true. And it really does seem like Tolkien really didn't know where he was going in the beginning. Because, the whole Tom Bombadil, what the heck's that doing, and moving around, and then it comes closer. So, and again, a lot of medieval romances, like Song of Roland, have that episodic feel going from one episode to the next. And by the way, did you notice this is the only book that doesn't have one of these? It's lacking a central what? All the other books have one. And this doesn't. What's that?
You're not an actual bad guy.
Yeah, you just said it. There's no villain in this. I mean, maybe Gumpus, but he's so weak, Governor. There really is no... And that's why the movie, it's kind of interesting. Okay, the movie, there is this green mist that keeps like kidnapping people and sucking them down, right? And even when they go to the dark island, it's coming around them and all. And nobody will know for sure, but it seems like they were trying to set it up for the silver chair. Because in the silver chair, when we get to the fourth one, it is the green witch, the emerald witch, and she lives underground. And it seems like, this is what I think they were trying to do, but they never made the fourth movie, is the witch is sucking people down into her kingdom to get ready for her war. And did you notice in the second and third movie, the white witch is back? Like in Prince Caspian, they almost bring her back, but they don't. But in the movie, that's a great scene. They bring that, because they had this idea that everybody's going to want to see linking characters or something. So they tried all that they could. And it was an interesting idea, the green mist.
Ploy, really.
What's that?
It's a marketing ploy.
It really is, you're right, to keep people coming back.
That way they have more stuff to sell.
Yeah, that's true, more merchandising.
But I was going to say about the mouse, Reaper Chief. I sort of thought he had a Napoleon complex after.
I see that, yeah.
Well, in all honesty, because Eustace has totally made fun of him. He's trying to be the brave,
Right.
noble mouse, so he's constantly having to prove himself and take the lead and take charge, even when it's not appropriate.
Right.
Or like the serpent, like he was leaning against the...
Well, yeah. I mean, and so, but I mean, he just is I think he's so bothered by his lack of respect.
Yeah, that's true.
That,
He is. He's short. No, don't. You know, I don't hear anybody making fun of anything. Like when he challenges the giant in Prince Caspian, right? But he does. Maybe he gets his comeuppance a little bit. But he learned. And well, in the second novel, he gets his comeuppance because he gets his tail cut off.
Yeah.
And at first, and we didn't get a chance to talk about this. It's a wonderful moment where perhaps you think too much about your honor, little one, right? And then, does anybody remember what causes Aslan to restore his tail? Remember what happens? It's not anything Reepicheep does.
Yeah, somebody else did it for him.
Okay, close. All of a sudden, Peepakeek and all the other mice do what?
Oh, they said they're going to cut off.
Right, they all grab their tails and they're about to cut off their own tails, right? We will not have an honor denied to our chief. And then Aslan says, it's wonderful, he says, "Ah, you have conquered me. You have great hearts. Not for your honor, Reepicheep, but for the love that is between you and your people." And then he gives him back his tail. Right? Sort of like, does anybody remember when Jesus heals somebody because of the faith of his friends? Remember the story in the Gospels? Yeah, he's got it. Yep, good. The paralytic, one of the friends, and he looked up and he saw their faith, and he healed him, which is a really cool story there. And he might have had that in mind. But again, and by the way, I discovered another reason that's such a great story, because I was being a good daddy, and I was reading to my children. And I was reading Aesop's fables. And there's an Aesop fable called The Fox and His Tail. And in this, they're always short. In Aesop's fable, the fox, his tail gets cut off in a battle. And so he goes in front of his people and he said, tails are really unnecessary things. I think we should all cut off our tails. And then one of them says, the only reason you're saying that is because you've lost yours and you want everybody else to lose theirs. So you see how Lewis takes that and turns it on its head? It's a wonderful moment where the other ones are actually ready to cut off. So there's no doubt in my mind that he had Aesop's fables in mind. It's really beautiful. You should you guys should work together and illustrate an Aesop's fables book or something. That'd be cool. By the way, the best illustrator of all is Arthur Rackham. Have you ever seen Arthur Rackham? You got to look him up if you haven't seen him. Probably the best illustrator. He illustrated Aesop's fables, but he also illustrated Wagner's Ring Cycle, illustrated all the fairy tales, French and German fairy tales. But Arthur Rackham.
Well, look up Drew Struzan.
Who's that? Is that recent or older?
My favorite illustrator of all time.
How far back does he go?
To the 70s. He's a movie poster illustrator.
Oh, okay.
But he's a legend. He was very much in the same style as Ansel. But we did much older posters. But Drew Struzan, he did every single poster you can think of, and then some you didn't even realize.
Did he do ones like what you did with Narnia?
No. What I did was all ink based. He did all mixed. He did like mixed media, like pencil, color.
Oh, that's cool.
Acrylic, and he did Star Wars.
Oh, he did Star Wars. Oh, okay.
Raiders of the Lost Ark and all that stuff. All Goonies.
Oh my gosh.
Don't tell. Or Adventures in Babysitting. All those.
Oh.
you would not realize how many posters he's done. He's
that's
my
neat.
absolute favorite illustrator.
Huh.
But yeah, he's amazing.
You like Saul Bass? You know who that is?
No.
That's the guy who made the little icons for things like in Vertigo and Psycho and stuff. He was like a graphic designer. I think he invented the design for AT&T. Everybody calls it the Death Planet, Death Star. Yeah. I'm pretty sure he actually came up with that design. Logo. He does the logos. Yeah. It's really cool. I mean, you don't realize how hard it is to make up a simple logo that can capture the whole concept of something. It's actually quite a talent.
I have a question about the book.
Good.
It seemed really weird. Why did Aslan say, I'm going to go and tell Trumpkin what's been happening?
It's just interesting. I guess he knows that Trumpkin is kind of lonely all on his own and is probably worrying. Remember, they don't have a cell phone. So basically, he's going to tell Trumpkin that everything's okay.
Yeah, because
I don't know if there's
random.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a plot reason. It just shows, I guess, Aslan's love, for Trumpkin, and maybe his readers are going to be excited to hear Trumpkin's name. I think we're kind of sad that we will meet Trumpkin again, by the way, in Silverchair, just briefly, and it's pretty funny. I know the boy's useless. You'll find when you get there, and he was kind of funny. But what's his name? Anyway, but good old Trumpkin. You like Trumpkin?
I do.
Yeah.
I know the story, but
Crotchety old guy. But
seriously,
yeah,
it's like-
you're right. There doesn't seem to be a
He was
reason for it.
moving. He's like,
Yeah.
and I'm going to go back
Yeah, no.
to see Trumpkin and tell him everything's going.
It is random. And like I said, it's weird not to have a villain. But to me, what happens is, and I was saying to some of you last time, to me, this is more about living the spiritual, like Pilgrim's Progress. You know, it's a day-by-day challenge. And notice how, to me, Aslan is much more like the Holy Spirit rather than Christ in this book, because he just keeps appearing when he's needed and helps and gives grace and then disappears again. And we can see him at the very end. But he's in the background much more in this. And it's the day-by-day challenge of life. And one of the things I love about Lewis as a Christian writer is when Eustace becomes undragoned, he doesn't immediately become a saint. He says, you know, there would still be times when he would get crotchety and all, but the cure had begun. So he's like saved, but it's going to take a while to be sanctified. It's not like an overnight process where he wakes up and suddenly he's a super nice guy, you know?
The only thing that made sense to me is I was trying to figure out, like, it really was all over the place. So I'm trying to figure out, like, there's no bad guy. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. But the only thing that made all the jumbled stories before it make sense is when she does the spell to reveal the things that are unseen.
Oh, yeah, the magician's book will get there, yeah.
Basically tells her, he's like, well, I'm here even when you can't see me.
Good.
And so that was like the only thing, because they'd all been experiencing little things.
That's good, the invisible presence, right.
Where they had to get through it, you know, like they had a little temptation, or they did this, or they did that. But it was all little things, right, that you need to do on your own.
Right.
And then he finally says to her then, when he's revealed, well, I'm here. You don't have to see me. I'm actually here.
Right.
Even when you don't see me. That was the only thing I was like,
That does
that
give it,
make
yeah.
all these other 5 things like, okay, because he was there all along. And
Yeah, what are they all about, these different adventures? And it is like Sinbad the Sailor or something. It's an
they're fighting
adventure.
over like the gold, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they just stop.
Yeah, well then the Aslan appears. Yeah, that's right.
So,
So-
like all fighting over the gold. And
Yeah,
oh, wait a minute.
he keeps coming and he passes by. And if you notice, the first time we see him in the undragoning, he's got the moon shining on him. But as we progress in the book, he gets more and more solar till he's like coming out of the sun. And when they look at him, he's so bright they can barely look at him. So he gets more and more solar as he moves. But it really is about, like I quoted last time, 1 Corinthians 10:13 is, no temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man. God is faithful and will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide also the way of escape that you might be able to endure it. That's one verse. And in a sense, that's what it is. They have to learn day by day, living the simple life. And that's what, he's trying to do something different each time. And they're gaining wisdom, they're gaining insight. Maybe that's the solar influence, right? But look at, before I forget though, that scene I was talking about with Reaper Chief. I just love this part here. So he's on a quest, like the quest for the Holy Grail. He's on a spiritual quest to get to the end of the world and find Aslan's country. And why? We're back on page 433. I expect to find Aslan's own country. It's always from the east, across the sea, that the great line comes to us. I say, that is an idea, said Edmund in an awed voice. But do you think Aslan's country would be that sort of country? I mean, the sort you could ever sail to? I do not know, madam, but there is this. When I was in my cradle, a woodwoman, a dryad, spoke this verse over me. Where sky and water meet, where the waves grow sweet, doubt not, Reaper cheap, to find all you seek. There is the utter east. And he says, I do not know what it means, but the spell of it has been on me all my life. That gives a little bit of a link too, that there's someone with a higher purpose. He's not there even just for adventure. He wants an encounter, maybe we'd say, right? And I just love it. There's a riddle that we have to solve. And I don't know if you got to the end. Do you understand why he says where the waves grow sweet? You know what like British mean if they say that it's sweet water? That's what we would call what?
It's calm.
What, calm, you said?
Yeah.
No, not just calm, but sweet water as opposed to
Salt water.
salt water, okay?
Fresh water.
Yeah, it's fresh water. In other words, sweet water is not, and it's easy to miss that because we don't use that phrase sweet water. But at the very end, when they've left the final island, they're moving on, and they're on an ocean, right? Ocean salt water, and all of a sudden, because one of the mermen like raises his sword, and so Rinpoche dives in, and then he suddenly realizes that miraculously it has become fresh water, sweet water. That's part of the miracle to indicate the end is coming. All of a sudden, and I just like, when we get there later, we'll spend most of next week. The last 4 chapters of this are some of the most beautiful ever. This is very much a lot of influence of Dante here, a lot of influence of the Odyssey, right? Any kind of story. Did any of you grow up watching the Sinbad the Sailor movies? Ray Harryhausen? You ever saw that Eye of the Tiger? What is it? The 7th Voyage of Sinbad, the Golden Voyage of Sinbad, Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. You remember any of those? Oh, there was Ray Harryhausen, the famous guy that did stop motion animation, and all the monsters. Did you ever see those? You know them? Some of them, but they're just really neat. They're fun. But anyway, it just adds something really neat about it. Trying to get to the east, trying to get where the sun rises, and so it's a riddle that we're trying to solve. Right? What do you think about that famous? Some people say it. Great opening lines. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. What's that the first line to? Yeah, Intelligent Cities, right? The other famous one is, what is it? It is a universal saying, often understood, that, a man with so much money is in want of a wife. Do you remember that? That's the first line of Pride and Prejudice. I don't remember, get it exactly. Famous lines, or what is it? Every happy family is the same. Every miserable family's miserable in their own. That's the beginning of Anna Karenina. But this is a great opening. There was a boy named Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. It's just a great opening, right? Now, did any of you read this and wonder why the heck is Lewis, who's a Christian, making fun of these people who don't smoke and don't drink and are vegetarians? Right? I mean, a lot of modern Christians. Wait, isn't that the good guy? Okay. You need to understand that in Lewis's day, those people were called cranks. That's the proper word for that. They were cranks. And this is kind of weird, but that would be a negative thing. Because do you know somebody else who didn't drink and didn't smoke and didn't let his followers do that and didn't want women having alcohol when they were pregnant? Even bad people have at least one good idea. Okay. What's that? This is Hitler, okay? Hitler was, against drinking, against smoking. His SS boys, they didn't drink, they didn't smoke, they didn't sleep around, they killed people. But I mean, that's what's kind of scary about it. He did start a little bit as a, quote, moral majority in that sort of stuff. And I mean, some of his ideas were right, like he told German women not to drink while you're pregnant. And so everybody's got some good ideas, but literally after World War II, just think of, what is that TV show, Mad Men or something? It was almost like an all-American thing in the 50s. And some people said the only way we can save our medical system, our healthcare system, is to go back to the 50s and all drink and smoke ourselves into an early grave. That may be the only way to save our things. That would be the best way to do it, right? But anyway, that's why he's making fun of them. For a while, it was almost your American duty to drink and smoke and all. I mean, do you remember that? Now, when I was a kid, I remember when my parents had friends over, everybody always had hard liquor. Do you remember that? Now they don't. They drink wine or something like that. But everybody had hard liquor all the time. It was always those mixed drinks, screwdrivers. And I think that was orange juice and vodka. Was that what it was? All these different mixed drinks and stuff. And people, I don't know, maybe now they still do that. But I just, it's changed.
It changes.
Maybe a little more.
Mixed drinks are in again.
Oh, they're coming in again with heavy liquor too?
Yeah, so
Manhattan. Oh, so they're back in. So see, so I guess it comes and goes.
They're probably in tonight too. But no.
I could use one right now. I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy. that was some what was that silly song? It was one of those. You ever heard that? I don't know what it was. It was a song. It might have been that guy that sang the Short People song. Did anybody remember that song? Shake that. It might have been Randy Newman, something like that. But I just remember some song. He's still around. That guy. He's won all these Oscars for writing all the Pixar songs. That's the same guy. He's still around. But anyway. Short people got no reason to live. Okay, I'm reliving the past, a very silly past. But anyway, what's wrong with Eustace Clarence Scrubb? What does he completely lack?
Fun.
No fun, right? He's got no fun. He's certainly not jovial. What else does he have? None of this.
Empathy.
That I hope all my MFAs at least have this.
Creativity.
Yeah, creativity, imagination. No imagination. Okay? He likes pictures of grain elevators, right? And fat children. And he likes beetles if they're pinned to a thing. And by the way, if you saw the movie, they do a great job. The kid that played Eustace was perfect. And I'm so sad they didn't make the movie, because even if they did, he's too old now. But there's a scene where he's got all these bugs and bottles and stuff like that. It's just perfect. He's the kid that completely lacks imagination. And the wonderful thing is that his lack of imagination almost gets him killed. Because when he sees the dragon, how does he react? He doesn't know what it is. He's got no name for it. He's read all the wrong books. I just love it. Lewis is laughing that he's now telling you, if you want to really survive, you've got to read fantasy books, right? That's sort of way, because the opposite. I don't need that. You got to get. No, he has read all the wrong books. He doesn't. And oh man, don't you love that diary he keeps? It's hysterical. It's on and on and on and on, complaining and complaining. And one of my favorite lines, and it's my favorite line because I hate to admit it, but I kind of agree with Eustace. I'm sort of ashamed, but I don't find it. It's the part where he says to Drinian, who's the captain. Right? Caspian's the king, but Drinian is the captain, right, of the ship. And I love that scene when he says, well, where I come from, we have ships that are so big, you wouldn't even know you're at sea. And do you remember what Drinian's answer is? Now what's the point of going to sea? And I hate to admit I agree with it. If you've ever been on a cruise, the wonderful thing about the cruise ships are so big, they don't even move. Some of the cruise ships are so steady you can play pool on them. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I who would get seasick actually like that. So I hate to agree with Eustace there, but I did that a great line. Eustace Clarence Scrubb. He's got to learn imagination, and with that courage, when he sees the treasure, I don't know if you understand, how does he react differently than Clinton would have reacted when he was a boy 5 years ago? How he would have reacted. You make me do this. It's very fun. Can you understand what's the difference? What a regular red-blooded American boy, when he sees treasure, what would he think?
Jumping for joy.
Yeah, jumping for joy because he's found something. It's an adventure. It's valuable. What is Eustace thinking? He's like, oh, with this money, I can lord it over. In other words, he only sees it in utilitarian value. He doesn't react to it the way a true kid would. This is an adventure. It's wonderful. It's shiny and all that sort of stuff. They might even put it in a museum if they're the young Indiana Jones, right? It's not about acquisition. And I love that this should be the motto of liberal arts education, is when they want to, and of course Rinpoche foolishly makes them go into the dark island. I don't know if you've gotten that far, but basically they're like, why should we do this, Rinpoche? What use is it? Use? We did not come here for use. We did not come to fill our belly. We came for adventures. We came for knowledge as an end in itself. That's the solar influence as well. Knowledge as an end in itself. Let's just look at the dragon thing and then we'll go. Because it's just fun. The whole part with Gumpus is fun, but it reminded me, did any of you, when you were a kid, watch the old Davy Crockett? Do you remember how Davy Crockett defeated, the bad guys? I think it's the Creek Indians that are attacking, and he's only got like a dozen men. I don't know if you remember the story, but basically what he does is he shoots and then he runs to another rock and shoots, and so it makes them feel like they're surrounded, right? And then they give up. If you've ever seen that, but I mean, it's just really, and then the whole slave trade thing, and did you understand why they're happy to get rid of Eustace, because nobody wants to buy Eustace? Any of you ever hear of a story when you were a kid called the Ransom of Red Chief? It's a story where they kidnap the boy, and then the kid drives them so crazy they got to pay the parents to take the kid back. It's the Ransom of Red Chief. You ever heard that famous story? Anyway, but let's look at, okay, first of all, the whole reason he gets caught up with the dragon is because he's trying to avoid work. So he said, and of course he said, I don't want to bother the other one, so I'll just drift away, right? He's trying to escape from work. It's wonderful. He's trying to justify everything. And he gets up there, and again, he sees the dragon, but he doesn't know what it is, right? And he watches it die, and then he goes over and he sees the gold, right? And he sleeps on the gold. Now, what happens to you when you sleep on a dragon's gold with greedy thoughts? Right? You turn into a dragon, right? Like the famous Fafnir, the dragon in the Ring Cycle of Wagner, was a giant. But because of its greed, it turned into a dragon. And then, see, the whole thing about dragons, they represent greed. Because dragons sleep on their gold, but they don't do anything with it. They just hoard it. But it doesn't do them any good. But, God forbid you steal one little bit of their treasure, they'll go crazy. Like who does? In The Hobbit. In The Hobbit, Bilbo steals that little cup or whatever it is, right? And it goes crazy because it doesn't have anything to do with it, but it just goes, what? So, anyway, and what did you think? Again, if this was the first time you read it and didn't know what was happening, did you like the way we slowly realized that Eustace has turned into a dragon?
I got it immediately.
Oh, you did get it.
Yeah.
But it's cool. At first he thinks it's a dragon. Then he thinks it's two dragons. But what's important about that is it's not only, what's the word I want? The tension, the suspense is really cool. But it's also the slow dawning. It's more psychological, the slow dawning of what he's made of himself. Sleeping on gold, dreaming dragonous thoughts. He had become a dragon. Right? And maybe that's how we can straighten out bad little boys, turn them into dragons for a while or something like that. But it turns out to be a good system for straightening it out. So he wakes up as a dragon, and this is page 466. Let's see, we're in chapter 6, The Adventures of Eustace. We're about maybe 2/3 of the way through it on page 466. In spite of his pain, his first feeling was one of relief. There was nothing to be afraid of anymore. He was a terror himself now, and nothing in the world but a knight, and not all of these, would dare to attack him. He could get even with Caspian and Edmund now. His first thought is, I'm big and tough and got scales. I can do whatever I want. And then, but the moment he thought this, he realized he didn't want to. He wanted to be friends. He wanted to get back among humans and talk and laugh and share things. He realized that he was a monster, cut off from the whole human race. An appalling loneliness came over him. He began to see the others had not really been fiends at all. He began to wonder if he himself had been such a nice person as he had always supposed. He longed for their voices. He would have been grateful for a kind word, even from Reepicheep. He needs to be cut off to suddenly realize the value of friendship and fellowship and stuff like that. He's become a monster. And, the whole thing's... And by the way, if you see the movie, they do something really cool, right? Instead of the whole thing where he's scratching out the name and stuff like that, what they do is the dragon. And again, if you've seen the movie and you don't know the book, you really think it's a dragon. They really do it a good way. Like in the movie, we see Eustace going after the gold, and then it cuts. And the next time the dragon comes, and the dragon swoops down and picks up Edmund and takes him up, and you're really terrified because we don't know what Eustace at this point. Takes him all the way up high over a ridge, and then it's overlooking a field, and he's burned in huge letters, I am Eustace. And it's really a good scene if you watch the movie. It's just it's like a soaring as you move up. It's, oh my gosh, we realize who it is for the first time. But here it makes sense. He tries to spell it out and all that sort of stuff. And Reepicheep lays with him on the shore and tells him stories about courage, about up and down, and all sorts of things like that, right? And he becomes helpful. He kills animals so they can eat. He cuts down a tree so they can have a new mast. All this sort of stuff, right? But what's going to happen? They can't take him with them, right? He can't fit on the ship. He can't fly forever without settling down. And that's when he's undragoned. And here's the cool thing. Instead of Eustace telling us the story directly, we get him telling the story to Edmund. Why does it make sense Eustace would tell the story to Edmund rather than Lucy. What do Eustace and Edmund have in common? What was Edmund like the first time he came to Narnia?
You got nothing on me.
Oh, because Edmund also was a butthole.
Yeah, thank you, butthole. That's so sweet, right? He actually says, he says, well, at least you're not as bad as I was. The first time I came to Narnia, I was a traitor. You're just an ass. Now, it actually doesn't sound as bad in English, British, because the British, you know what they say for your butt? They say arse, A-R-S-E, as in, and what a wonderful farce when she said, move your blooming arse. Okay, that's from My Fair Lady, right? Another Audrey Hepburn. From My Fair Lady. But anyway, so that he was. But it's just wonderful that these two boys whose lives have been changed by Aslan get to meet each other and sympathize with each other. And Edmund, again, just like he showed himself to be very kind and supportive to Lucy in the second book, because he remembered, here he shows a little more kindness. And it's just neat because the story is told to us secondhand, right? And the first time we meet Aslan, he's under the moonlight. And of course, moonlight is not actually accurate. What is moonlight? Right? The moon gives off no light, right? It's a rock. It's a reflection of sunlight, right? So it's just neat that we've got moonlight in a story that's being told to us secondhand by reflection. Isn't that cool? That's another Michael Ward insight. I didn't make that one up because, again, it's a whole solar thing, and I remember that one. It's kind of cool too. And again, Aslan comes to him and tells him to do what? There's a pool, and he wants. First, you have to undress, right? And Eustace thinks about it. Dragons are like snakes, and what do snakes do sometimes? They shed their skin. Eerie sort of thing, right? So scratch, and off comes this knobbly little, clothing. And then what does he discover?
More scales.
There's another one under it, and he does it again and again. He can't do it. He can't undragon himself. He can't remove the scales. And then Aslan says, "Shall I do it for you?" Right? And he says, yes. But he says, at first it hurt. He felt like those claws went right to his heart. But then it was so wonderful feeling it come off. By the way, in the movie, they do it in a really neat way. He's a dragon, and Aslan puts his hand on the sand, and as he goes like that in the sand, he comes undragon. Now, somebody in the know told me that they wouldn't let them do it in the book because if he's scratching, if he's basically clawing the dragon, he's actually clawing a little boy. And they told him it would be a PG-13 rating if we did that. So apparently that's why they had to change it. But it was kind of cool the way they did it. Like you see it in the sand and then you see him coming undone, almost like Beauty and the Beast at the end. But so what does this mean? What is Edmund and what are we all unable to do ourselves? What can we not remove ourselves?
Our old self.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. Our old self, our sinful nature. Christ has to do it. So this is a metaphor for salvation. We can't save ourselves. We can't remove the old man, the old Adam, as Paul calls it. That has to be done by God himself. Right? We can't do it. We try, but all we do is if we try to get there by works, we're like the proverbial frog in the well who climbs up 2 and then slips down 3 and never quite gets out. So it's a powerful way of doing it. And then after his salvation experience, he's literally baptized. He throws him in there. Right? Another thing is, do you remember what's causing him pain? Did you understand that?
Bracelet.
Good. He had put on this bracelet. You've seen it in old movies, the armlet. Any of you ladies have one of those? You're aware of that? You don't see that very often, but like sometimes you see the circular one that looks like Cleopatra. You have one of those?
Yes.
Usually it comes this far, though. It doesn't go up here, I don't think. Right here, right?
It'd be nice if it's all gold. It'd be valuable.
Oh, that would be kind of cool. Pulled up there, right? So he puts it on, and when he's a puny little boy, it doesn't hurt. But now it's cutting into him, and it cannot be removed, even with what? Do you remember who tries to get rid of it? Lucy puts the cordial. It won't work. This seems to be another metaphor for the sinful nature that gnaws at us, the old Adam that we can't take off. So it's a fascinating concept there. And he's got to allow it. He's got to allow himself to be undressed because he can't do it. Then he's undressed. Then he gets his new clothes. He's saved in that sense, literally born again. And he's undragoned and thrown into the water and baptized, right? This is a really neat concept, a neat way of talking about it that's just totally unique, right? And I won't show, but I love it. He says, I think you've met Aslan. And Eustace says, do you know him? And he says, well, he knows me. That's kind of a cool way, right? Now, it's not so much that I know God, it's that he knows me, right? Also, it's at the end of how the adventure ended, the almost the end of that chapter. It's, let me see, page 475. First of all, I just love this scene when it says, after a bit, the lion took me out and dressed me. Dressed you? With his paws? Well, I don't exactly remember that bit. How are we applauding? We don't have hands. I don't know if any of you grew up on VeggieTales. Okay. How are we applauding? That's the most brilliant show. How they get those vegetables to do it. No hands, no arms, It's great. You didn't get into them? Were you freaked out by it?
No, he just.
Not you, your kid. Your son, oh. That's interesting.
The pickle reminded me of John Kerry.
Oh, yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Sort of look like John Kerry.
That is funny. Well, the cucumber, that's right. Oh, you mean the politician, Jack?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I guess you're right. I didn't think about it.
Absolutely.
For a second, I was thinking you said
And
John.
he has the same affluent
Yeah, that's true.
sound to his voice.
That's true. I didn't think about that, yeah. First, I thought you were saying John Kerry, the comedian, but John Kerry, yeah, that's funny. But my kids, they liked it, but then they grew out of it. And I said, kids, my college students like VeggieTales. They also, I don't know why, stopped liking Winnie the Pooh. I said, adults like Winnie the Pooh. What are you talking about? So which Winnie the Pooh drawings do you prefer? There's the ones that are more cute, the Disney, and then the ones that are a little bit more artistic.
No. The old ink and watercolor.
Yeah. Those are cool.
That's where it's at.
Do you like the illustrations for Alice in Wonderland too? Those are neat illustrations.
Those are neat, but not as much as I like Winnie the Pooh.
But the Winnie the Poohs are good.
I like all the single plate Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, okay.
Like the actual plates.
That's right. Yeah.
Those are
That
great.
is good stuff. Yeah. Let's have a book we have to put together. So really quickly, then he's undragoned and he says, I think you've seen Aslan, said Edmund. Aslan? I've heard that name mentioned several times since we joined the Dawn Treader, and I felt, I don't know what, I hated him. But I was hating everything then. And by the way, I'd like to apologize. I'm afraid I've been pretty beastly. And that's when he says, between ourselves, you haven't been as bad as I was. You were only an ass, but I was a traitor. I just love that. Don't say that to anybody else. They'll smack you. But notice that he hated the name just like Eustace and just like Edmund did. Remember, Aslan's on the move, and the kids have all the wonderful feeling, but he has a sort of feeling of dread and stuff like that. And that's, again, where he sees them. And then finally, he throws the ring up there, and it stays there forever. And at the very end of the chapter, it would be nice and fairly nearly true to say that from that time forth, Eustace was a different boy. To be strictly accurate, he began to be a different boy. He had relapses. There were still many days when he could be very tiresome, but most of those I shall not notice. The cure had begun. I think we did enough. What was I going to say? So, again, next time we'll look at some of the other things, and especially the Magician's book is wonderful, and then those whole last 4 chapters as we go into the light. By the way, are any of the artists, are you inspired by this idea of the spheres? It's just really cool.
I feel like I'm a shitty writer compared to everybody. I'm like, man, I didn't think.
Well, that's what I like. You said that in your oral last time, that you start realizing that Lewis is detailed. He does know what he's doing. Yeah, he slowly puts it together.
Yeah.
And notice he does it all with simple language. He never gets beyond.
No, it's not wordy. You don't,
yeah.